Hello, everyone. Today I want to look at another verse or passage of the Bible that I believe has been largely lost in translation. Now, this particular verse is enshrined in the King James Version. So some of the modern translations have upgraded or even corrected this and made it clear, but it's definitely not clear in the traditional translations. The American Standard Version, for example, which is another older translation. King James was in the year 1611, the American Standard 1901. But once these verses get into the heads of people, they just tend to exist forever, especially anything in the King James Version. We still have millions and millions of people that would say something. You remember the old joke, if the King James was good enough for Paul, it's good enough for me. Ha ha ha, I heard that all my life. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll make it nice and large for you there. So, lost in translation, did Adam have an immortal soul? Question mark. And I'm talking about a single verse here, King James Version, Genesis 2, verse 7. And the Lord God, Lord is YHVH, Yahweh or Jehovah in English. And the Lord God formed man, Adam in Hebrew, dust of the ground. Literally, it's he formed him dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils, his nose, literally, the breath of life. And Adam again, man, became a living soul. So we have two phrases here. Is breath of life that God puts into humans, is that something maybe special? Because what seems to follow is once he gets the breath of life, he becomes a living soul. Does that mean an immortal soul? Do humans have something special above the animal world? So the problem is really in the translation. Here is the Hebrew, and I transliterated it. Breath of life is nishmat chaim, and it's in a collective plural here, chaim. So the breath, nishmat, literally just to breathe, and the living breath, the breath of life. And the other phrase is nephesh chaya. There's chaya again, life from chai. It's in the feminine. Nephesh. So is nephesh the soul? And does living maybe even mean like an immortal soul, something special? Now, I would translate that a living breather. Nephesh refers to the neck, we think, etymologically, if you look back at its derivation in Hebrew and other cognate languages. So if you put it together, you have a breathing, living breather. So a nephesh is essentially a creature. Now, what happens in translations is the translation begins to try to reflect something different. For example, here's Genesis 1:30 on breath of life. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I've given every green plant for food. So the entire living, breathing creature world, including humans, are vegetarian in this account. But if you go ahead 6 chapters to the flood, Genesis 7, they went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh. Now that's animals, if you look at the context, in which there was the breath of life. In other words, they're living breathers. These animals, they have the breath of life because they breathe, and therefore they're living breathers, not dead breathers. And there are references in the Hebrew Bible to a dead nephesh, meaning a breather that's not breathing. It's not a living breather, it's a dead breather. We'd call it a corpse. If we go on to verse 22, everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. Notice everything in whose nostrils, breath of life, Adam breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. So this is beginning to sound amazingly scientific as people discuss it today, that all breathing animal biological life, what we call mammalian life in particular, is related in some way. However you explain evolution, creation, or whatever, the relation is very clear of our bodies as animals or as living creatures to other living creatures who breathe. Now, if we take the other word, living soul, which is really a misleading translation in the King James, the American Standard Version, look what you get. And God said, this is verse 20, let the waters, that's the oceans and seas, bring forth swarms of living creatures. That's exactly the same word. That's exactly the same word in Hebrew, nephesh chaya, and let birds fly above the earth across the firmament of the heavens. And in verse 24 on down, and God said, let the earth, the dust, the land, bring forth living breathers, living creatures, according to their types, their kinds, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth, according to their kinds. So you see how when you call these creatures beasts and call them living creatures, it starts sounding different from Adam, who became a living soul. And even if you translate it a living being, I think that's maybe somewhat misleading, unless you're going to do it for the fish and all other creatures that creep upon the earth, as we say. Now, this is echoed in Ecclesiastes, one of the later books of the Hebrew Bible, this thought based exactly on Genesis 2, verse 7 that we're considering today. And notice that it's going to get questioned because now we're moving into the later period, maybe even some think the post-exilic period. Maybe Greek philosophy is beginning to influence things. Notice, first we have a declaration, verse 19. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath. We've just seen that. And man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is emptiness. You breathe your last, you go back to the dust. All go to one place, all are from the dust, and all return to the dust again. Now, after that, you have somebody writing, this is verse 21, and I didn't even number it because I think it's likely an interpolation. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down to the earth? So the idea begins to develop in the Hellenistic period, in the Greek period particularly. Maybe humans are unique. Maybe they possess a different kind of a soul or a different kind of a life. And we just use the word soul often in contrast to the body. There's the body and the soul as if it's an ontological difference of being, when actually the difference in the body and the soul is the living breather body is alive, and the one that's not a living breather is a dead breather, meaning it's not breathing and it's dead, but there's no difference in terms of the body or even of the being. Genesis 3:19, Adam's told, back to Genesis, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Some of you know about my translation of Genesis, which I encourage you to get. You can get it on Amazon, because so many of the fundamental terms of the Hebrew Bible and even the New Testament, for example, this verse is quoted by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, as it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living breather, but the last Adam is a life-giving spirit. Now, that would be what people call today an immortal soul. So these verses, not just this verse, but many other verses and vocabulary in Genesis become fundamental how they're translated. And so I try my best to capture a kind of transparent English flavor that'll take you through back to the original Hebrew. And I'm going to give you lots more examples in this series. So if you want to get the book of Genesis, my translation. You're welcome to it. It's called A New Translation from the Transparent English Bible. And in the back, it has just about 1,000 notes. And I put them in the back because I don't want you to look down each time. I want you to just read this. I intended this to be a work of literature that you could just sit and read. And especially if you read it aloud, it's got a drumbeat rhythm that is really incredible. So take a look if you're interested, and I'll see you next time as we continue to be lost in translation and we find our way with the compass of accurately looking at the words. So my motto is from the words, on the basis of the words, and in connection to the words. Let's work out what some of these texts mean.